Hi, I'm Shaul. I was a bit shocked to find out that Nikon, my favorite photography brand, has sued Viltrox in China, seeking for compensation. Viltrox is perhaps the leading third-party optics manufacturer located in China. And it has been making very nice optics for the past 5 years or so, I think. Viltrox has been successfully competing with OEM glass, making lenses that are really superior compared to what third-party lens manufacturers used to create. And even compared to what first-party manufacturers used to make until about a decade ago. The business model of third-party lenses is questionable. It is parasitic. Those manufacturers reverse engineer the mounts of established camera manufacturers and use the physical mount as well as the communication protocols to compete with the holders of those mounts. So what they do is a little bit unethical. Although some of the manufacturers accept this. But that depends on the manufacturer itself, of course. For example, Sony has been welcoming third-party lenses from the onset. In 2013, they created the FE mount, or the full-frame E-mount. That mount was not really suitable to host a full-frame sensor. It was quite a challenge to make lenses for this mount. In the first years after the creation of the Alpha 7 camera series with a full-frame sensor, they cooperated with Zeiss that made lenses for those cameras. Zeiss was the only optical manufacturers with sufficient knowledge and experience to make acceptable optics for this mount. However, Sony needed many more options, except the relatively expensive Leica glass. So they opened up the mount to anyone who wanted to make lenses for it. And that situation is ongoing until today. Sony slightly cripples third-party lenses by not allowing them to use the maximum frame rates of their cameras, and disabling some features like focus breathing correction. But for stills photographers, this is not a real limitation. Of course, third-party lenses are a lot cheaper than OEM lenses. This is true for all mounts. For instance, a lens like the Sirui 35mm f1.4 is priced at around $600, I think, while Sony's equivalent, the 35mm f1.4 GM, is priced at around $1,500 the last time I checked. So it makes sense to buy a third-party lens. Those lenses are not really inferior to the first-party lenses. The Sirui 35mm f1.4 is a very clean lens, sharp from corner to corner, just like its GM equivalent. You really need to pixel peep to look at the image at 200-300% enlargement to notice any difference, if at all. And that goes for many third-party primes. Sony's business model is selling electronics. So whatever promotes their camera sales would be acceptable for them. However, traditional photography companies like Canon, Nikon, Pentax perhaps, Fujifilm, pride themselves as manufacturers of optics. They look at the industry, at the market, from a different standpoint. They perceive cameras as a means to sell lenses. That makes them much less keen to share their mounts with anyone who might make a lens for it. Nikon in particular has been underpricing their camera offerings in order to promote sales of glass. And the existence of third-party lenses that compete with their own glass for the same mount, for the same market space, is a little bit disturbing to them. Canon closed the mount from the very beginning. They forbid any third-party manufacturer to make lenses that use the communication protocol of the RF mount, unless it's under licensing. And they are quite reluctant to license any such lenses. Only recently they allowed Sigma, I think, to make some lenses for APS-C RF cameras. Canon is the market leader. It has the largest market share out of the entire photographic industry. So they can do it without risking a hit to their revenue. Nikon is a different story. Their current market share in the mirrorless market is around 12 to 15% only. It is located in the third place. So they can't really allow themselves to piss off their users until now. So What happened that Nikon decided to restrict the availability of third-party autofocusing glass? Well, there could be some explanations. First of all, the improvement in quality of third-party prime lenses, especially the ones made in China, is quite alarming to Nikon. Viltrox in particular makes lenses that compete with the top-end glass offered by Nikon. And it competes quite successfully. The Lab series made by Viltrox in particular, those are f1.2 primes made to a very high construction, the optical standard. It really threatens the sales of Nikon's very high-end professional primes. Viltrox has announced its plans to start making zooms. Zooms are a lot more difficult to design and produce to a high standard. So far, only Japanese, maybe Korean companies were able to make high-end, high image quality zooms. And that was perhaps the basis of Japanese camera manufacturer profitability. High-end zooms are the bread and butter of professional photographers, and the lack of third-party alternatives, except Japanese alternatives, lenses made by manufacturers like Tamron or Sigma, maybe by Samyang too in South Korea to some extent. Well, that allowed the OEM manufacturers to keep floating, keep being profitable to some extent. If Chinese companies start making high quality zooms, that will really threaten the OEMs. I expect even Sony to try to block Viltrox in its zoom offerings. The third trigger of this lawsuit is Viltrox and Sirui recently joining the L-mount consortium that is managed by Leica. If Viltrox is willing to pay Leica due fees to be able to make lenses for the L-mount, then why wouldn't it pay the same fees to manufacturers like Nikon and Canon? It only makes sense. Nikon is in a quite delicate position here. It really doesn't want to shed any users, but on the other hand, those third-party lenses pose a threat over its viability as a company. Now, I think that all Nikon is trying to achieve is financial compensation. They don't really want to block those third-party manufacturers from using their mount. Nikon would rather concentrate on expensive lenses made for professionals and let other manufacturers fill in the more affordable tier of glass. Importantly, Nikon does not have such a problem with smart adapters. There are some very useful adapters in the market, also made by third-party Chinese companies, such as the E to Z adapters that allow the use of E-mount lenses made for the Sony mount on Z-mount Nikon cameras. I think that Nikon acknowledges the special needs of video shooters who are more savvy about lenses than most amateur still shooters. And they would not like to restrict lens compatibility to their cameras. So they do allow manufacturers to make adapters that would let the user mount almost any lens on their Z mount and use those lenses almost seamlessly. Perhaps they are right in assuming that video shooters are more willing to use adapted lenses. So they are trying to make a separation between those two demographics of photographers. There are still many ways in which you can use a third-party autofocusing lens on a Nikon Z-mount camera. One of them is that obvious solution of using those thin E to Z adapters with E-mount lenses. There are hundreds and hundreds of such lenses to choose from, and most of them are very good lenses. They are sharp and clean. They are very well corrected for any optical aberrations. Another option is to use the Nikon's f2Z adapter, which allows you to use autofocusing f-mount lenses, including third parties like Sigma and Tamron offerings that will work seamlessly on a mirrorless Z camera. Some of those lenses, such as the art series of primes and zooms made by Sigma, are still considered excellent lenses in the professional sense. They are also high resolving and very clean and sharp corner to corner. F-mount lenses are of course made for DSLR, so they are mostly larger and heavier, but that would not really hinder a professional photographer who is hired to perform a specific job in the best way they can. Similarly, you can still mount autofocusing EF mount lenses made for Canon camera on a Z mount body. Those adapters are made by third parties, but they are very efficient. They make working with those lenses almost seamless, with the added benefit of in-body stabilization that most Nikon cameras have. To conclude, the blocking of the Z mount is not really watertight. The lawsuit only refers to one third-party manufacturer, albeit an important one, and it only covers Z-mount lenses. It doesn't cover adapters. I think that lawsuit is designed to allow Nikon for its due compensation. It's not really designed to completely block manufacturers from producing lenses for the Z mount. Maybe zoom lenses will be an exception to this rule, but it's too early to tell. How does it affect me personally? Well, I admit that I did buy 4 third-party Z-mount lenses, all made in China. The lenses I'm after are not exactly those very well-corrected, sharp lenses. I'm looking for other attributes, like a lower contrast at the high frequency level of detail, and some chromatic aberration, some astigmatism to allow the glass to convey the three-dimensionality of the wall. So I handpicked some lenses that might have those attributes I'm interested in. And all 4 are somewhat disappointing. I'm not very characterful. They all look quite modern, quite flat and clinical, to my disappointment. Almost all Chinese prime lenses are made to compete with the industry standard, which is currently the GM series of primes made by Sony. So they are not designed for 3D pop, for character. They are designated for more professional use, where you do not want any character, where you look for a result that is as clean and as malleable as possible. On the other hand, Nikon itself makes some more characterful lenses that do have a certain dimensionality, that are better suited for shooting living things, like people, like landscapes, like evolving human situations. The lens shooting me right now is one of them. It's the Nikon Z 35mm f1.4, which is not your typical modern lens. It doesn't contain any ED glass, for example. It doesn't correct all chromatic aberration in such a perfect manner, and thus it's a nicer lens. It produces a livelier image. Those lenses made by Nikon, despite being more to my taste, are not very expensive. That is Nikon's attempt to fill in its low tier of prime lenses. This lens, the 35mm f1.4, is currently sold for about $550, I think, and that makes it quite comparable to the prices equivalent lenses made by third-party manufacturers. The lens shooting me now is its brother. It's the 50mm f1.4 Z lens made by Nikon. Some call it an awful lens because it has some field curvature, it has some chromatic aberration, And it is definitely not suitable for professional use, especially not for situations where you need a very clean image, reproduction, product, architecture. But for living things, for people, for events, it's a fantastic lens. It makes a poppy image that truly conveys life as it is. Perhaps you can appreciate three-dimensionality transferred to the sensor by this lens. Third-party lenses, autofocusing lenses with modern features are not really required, at least not by me. I don't need all this cleanliness, this clinical rendition of the image. More than that, I don't want it. It doesn't serve my style of photography very well. These are not the attributes I'm after, and I'm quite happy with Nikon's own offerings. Those older photographic manufacturers know what they are doing. They don't need computer-assisted optical design to make good optics. They know what a photograph should look like in any application, and they're trying to support the users, mostly their older generation users, in order to help them achieve really nice results. Would I like Nikon, Canon, and other manufacturers to make more such lenses? Maybe smaller ones with aperture rings made of metal? Well, yes, of course. But as it stands, I'm quite happy with the current offerings. Please tell me what you think of the situation, not only from Nikon's point of view, but what the situation with third-party lens manufacturers means for the entire industry. Would you be willing to switch systems in order to mount third-party lenses on your mirrorless camera that are cheaper and perform just as well as OEM offerings? Do you think the business model of third-party lens manufacturing is viable? What would you think if third-party zooms suddenly start to threaten the viability of camera manufacturers? Please let me know in the comments. If you like this video, if you like the contents of my channel, please consider buying me a coffee. It's a nice gesture between gentlemen. There's a link down in the description below. So thank you for watching, and see you again soon.